I don't stay in hotels often. When I do, I'm the kind of traveler who reads the fire exit map on the back of the door, checks the lock twice, and keeps the bathroom light on all night. Old habits from years of solo travel. Practical, not fearful. The hotel was a mid-range property on the edge of a quiet inland city, the kind of place that fills up with conference attendees and regional salespeople. I was there for 4 nights, covering a training seminar. Room 224, second floor, facing the interior courtyard. Quiet, carpeted corridors, the particular hush of a building designed to absorb sound. I settled in on a Sunday evening without incident, unpacked methodically, set my toiletry bag on the left side of the bathroom counter, positioned my charger on the nightstand. Small routines. I've learned they help you feel at home in a space that isn't yours. The first thing I noticed was on Monday night. I came back from the seminar dinner around 9:30, tired and ready to sleep. Everything in the room looked exactly as I'd left it, except my toiletry bag was on the right side of the counter. I stood in the bathroom doorway and looked at it. I'm left-handed. I always keep things on the left. I hadn't touched the bag since morning. The rational explanation arrived immediately. Housekeeping. They move things when they clean. I placed it back on the left, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. But I lay awake longer than I'd intended, turning it over. Small things bother me when I can't fully explain them. Eventually, the hum of the HVAC unit pulled me under. Tuesday passed normally. I came back to a tidied room and checked the bathroom counter first, bag on the left. I almost laughed at myself. Then I noticed the desk chair. It was angled differently than I'd left it, pulled slightly away from the desk and turned a few degrees toward the window. Not dramatically, the kind of shift that happens when someone sits down and doesn't push the chair back precisely. I stood in the middle of the room and looked at it for a long moment. Housekeeping again. They move around the furniture. I straightened the chair, sat at the desk, answered my emails, told myself I was being particular about nothing. Wednesday night, I came back later than usual, nearly midnight. The corridor was empty and quiet, lit by that particular flat hotel light that makes everything look like it's waiting. I let myself in, turned on the bedside lamp, and immediately noticed the curtain. The blackout curtain was drawn closed. I always left it open a few inches. I like to see the courtyard light. It had been open when I left that morning. Housekeeping had been in. I could see the bed was made, but the curtain was closed completely, and there was something about the room behind it that felt different. Not visibly different. Something in the quality of the air, a warmth that didn't match the HVAC setting. I stood just inside the door for a full minute. The room was silent. Nothing moved. I walked to the curtain and pulled it open. The courtyard beyond the glass was quiet, orange lit, empty. I turned around and looked at the room properly. Bag on the right side of the counter again, visible through the open bathroom door. Chair angled away from the desk. I hadn't imagined it. Both of them again changed. I called the front desk and asked whether anyone had accessed my room after the morning housekeeping visit. The woman on the line checked and said no. The room log showed only the one entry from 10 that morning. I asked whether maintenance had been in. She checked again, no. I described what I'd been finding. She was polite and professional and said she'd note it and have security do a corridor check. I thanked her, hung up, and stood in the center of the room trying to decide what I actually believed. I moved the desk chair against the inside of the door before I got into bed. I know that sounds like an overreaction to a misplaced toiletry bag and a rearranged chair. But the thing about small details, once they form a pattern, is that they stop feeling small. The security officer knocked at 7 the next morning and asked if everything was all right. I said yes. He told me they'd reviewed what they could and found nothing conclusive, but that they'd moved me to a different room as a precaution. Room 310, West Wing, different corridor. I packed in under 10 minutes and didn't look back. Nothing had been taken. Nothing was clearly, provably wrong. When I try to explain it to people, they usually suggest it was just housekeeping being inconsistent. Maybe they're right, but I've stayed in hotels most of my adult life. Housekeeping has moved my things before. I've never once felt, standing in a room that should be empty, that warmth, that specific sense of air recently disturbed. Room 224 was quiet when I left it. The chair was straight. The curtain was open. Whether it stayed that way, I'll never know.
The hotel sat at the edge of a highway junction town, one of those places that exists entirely in service of people passing through. A truck stop, 2 gas stations, a diner, and the hotel where I ended up after my car developed a problem that the single local mechanic couldn't address until morning. It wasn't somewhere I'd chosen. That matters somehow. The woman at the desk assigned me room 108, ground floor, end of the corridor. She had the efficient warmth of someone who checks in tired strangers every night and has long stopped wondering about their stories. She handed me the key card and told me the diner across the road closed at 10. The room was clean and featureless. Cream walls, dark carpet, a window with a ground-level view of the parking lot. I closed the curtain, ate vending machine crackers for dinner, and was in bed by 9:30, with my phone charging on the nightstand and nothing in my mind except the hope that my car would be a simple fix. I fell asleep quickly. The road noise was a steady, neutral presence, and I've always slept well to the sound of distant traffic. The phone rang at 11:47. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone when the bedside phone startled me awake. The room phone, the corded desk unit near the television. I lay still for a moment, not entirely awake, listening to it ring. 3 times. 4. I assumed it was the front desk, a wrong room dial, or some automated courtesy call. I answered. The line was open. I could hear the quality of it, that thin, slight static of an active connection, but no one spoke. I said hello twice. Nothing. I set the receiver down and lay back. Wrong number, a misdialed room. I was back toward sleep within a few minutes. The phone rang again at 1:12. This time I was fully awake before the second ring. I answered more quickly. Same open line. Same thin static. This time I stayed on longer, maybe 20 seconds, listening. And this time, at the end of those 20 seconds, I heard something. Not a voice, a sound. A low, slow exhalation. The sound of someone breathing out deliberately, the way a person does when they've been holding their breath and finally let it go. Then the line went dead. I sat up in bed with the receiver in my hand in the dark and stayed very still. The curtain over the ground-level parking lot window was closed. The room door had the deadbolt and the security bar engaged. I had checked both when I came in. Habit. Both were still in position. The room was silent and exactly as it had been. I turned on the bedside lamp. I got up and checked the door, physically touching both the deadbolt and the bar. I checked the bathroom. I stood in the middle of the room and listened. Nothing. I called the front desk from the room phone and told the man who answered, different person than before, a quiet night attendant, that I'd received 2 calls to my room. He sounded mildly puzzled and said no calls had been routed to room 108 that night through the hotel system. He said the desk hadn't tried to reach me. I asked if calls could come through to room phones from outside the hotel system. A pause. He said yes. If someone dialed the property number and entered the room extension directly, those calls would route through. He asked if I wanted to report it. I said I wasn't sure yet. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp on, and thought about what that meant. Someone had called my specific room, not the front desk, not a wrong number, my room, twice, with the specific interval of 90-odd minutes between calls. Someone who either knew which room I was in or had been working through the extensions systematically and reached me. I found the second possibility only marginally less unsettling. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in the desk chair with the lamp on and watched the door and waited for morning. At 6:15, I called the mechanic, who mercifully answered early. At 7:40, I checked out. The man at the desk offered no information about the calls without my prompting, and I didn't ask again. My car was fixed by noon. I was back on the road by 12:30. The mechanic asked if I'd slept well at the hotel. I said it was fine. He nodded and said most people said that. He said it in a way that suggested he'd heard the alternative a few times as well. I didn't ask him to elaborate. I paid my bill and left that town in my rearview mirror as quickly as I could manage. The breathing on the line, that slow, deliberate exhale, is the thing I hear when a hotel room goes very quiet. It doesn't take much, just that particular thin static and the silence after.
I noticed the connecting door the moment I walked in. It was against the left wall between the wardrobe and the bathroom, a standard interior door with a separate lock on my side. Hotels have these for families and adjoining room bookings. When the rooms aren't booked together, both doors stay locked independently, a reasonable system in theory. I was staying at a small hotel in a coastal town, off-season, midweek, the kind of visit where you're one of maybe 8 guests in a 40-room building. I was there for 2 nights, using the trip as a working retreat. I'd booked late and hadn't noticed the connecting door as a feature of the room description. I tested the lock on my side. Secure. I left it and went about settling in. I had a productive evening. Worked at the desk until 10, ate room service, went to bed with the professional satisfaction of someone who'd accomplished what they came for. The ocean was audible through the window, a rhythmic, neutral sound. I slept well. In the morning, I showered and noticed, in passing, that the connecting door had a faint line of light along its bottom edge, light coming from the room on the other side. I stood and looked at it briefly. The adjacent room was occupied. That was completely normal. I noted it and moved on. I came back that evening to find my laptop moved. Not significantly. A few inches to the right on the desk, turned very slightly. I was certain because I positioned my laptop with the charging cable on the left, which requires a specific orientation. The cable was still on the left, but the whole unit had shifted. Housekeeping. They clean around things imprecisely sometimes. I repositioned it and sat down to work. Later that evening, around 11, I heard something from the connecting door. It was quiet enough that I initially filed it as the building settling, a low creak, structural. But it repeated, not randomly, every few minutes, the same soft creak at approximately the same location. The location of someone standing against the door. I stopped typing and listened. The creak didn't come again for a while. Then, once more. I understood, after a few minutes of careful listening, what I was actually hearing. The door on the other side was being leaned against, gently, intermittently, with the particular soft resistance of weight applied and then relieved. Someone in the adjacent room was leaning against the connecting door, listening, perhaps, the way I was now listening. I left the desk lamp on, moved to the bed, and didn't sleep. By 2 in the morning, the sound had stopped. I lay in the quiet and thought about my laptop's position and the light under the door. At checkout, I asked the front desk, as casually as I could manage, whether the room next to mine had been occupied. The woman looked at the system and said, no, the adjacent room had been vacant both nights.
I asked whether anyone had been in my room aside from housekeeping. She said no. I described the laptop. She frowned and said she'd note it. I didn't describe the sound at the door. I'm not sure why. Perhaps because I didn't want to hear myself say it aloud, or because I couldn't explain what it meant. Both locks on a connecting door have to be disengaged for the door to open. The lock on my side was always engaged. The room next door was supposedly empty. I've stayed in hotels with connecting doors since then. I always test the lock now, and then I push a piece of luggage against it. Not because I think something is on the other side, just because I've learned I sleep better when I'm certain.